Professor Nsenga Burton from Tuskegee University, which I had the privilege of visiting not too long ago. We'll invite her out. And
yes, yay!
There she is. Hi there.
Hi.
How are you? And your panel. And we'll let you introduce your panel.
Yeah,
right.
David and Kristy coming out. Enjoy.
Kristy Drutman.
How are
David.
you? To you.
Mongabay. All right. It's all yours.
Oh, awesome. That was quick. Hi, everyone. How are you? Good. All right. Well, first of all, we'd like to thank Frank, Dr. Cheers, Ashley P., Kim, and Aaron. They have been most helpful in getting us here and making sure that we're taken well taken care of. So we appreciate you. Today's session is about crafting stories that stick, obviously, but not just stories that inform, right? Stories that move people to care, act, and share. So it's a time of climate urgency and digital overload. Storytelling is one of our most powerful tools for connection and change. So we're gonna get into a great conversation here. I'm so excited. I'm sure that you're excited as well. So let's just start like really gently, and then we'll move into some more complex questions. But when you think about authentic storytelling in climate and environmental work, what does that actually look like in practice? You wanna start?
Yeah, totally. Well, hi everyone. I'm Kristy Drutman. I'm the founder of Browngirlgreen Green. You've heard me on stage the past few days, but a lot of the work I've done over the past few years has been talking about climate solutions through an intersectional lens and thinking about what types of voices are not being like the most highlighted or discussed when it comes to environmental solutions. And I would say the interesting part of doing that kind of work has been really making sure I'm intentional about how the subjects are displayed, so making sure that the way that I'm talking about an issue isn't just one-sided, that I try to find a balance between the different sides of an issue, and being, just like self-critical in myself on like, okay, if I was watching this and I never knew about this topic, would I understand what I'm trying to convey to the audience? Because I think sometimes when it comes to climate storytelling, a lot of us are scientists. I have a climate science background. We can get into the weeds with technical jargon and saying words and statements that we think, oh, everyone will know that. The general public, how could they not know what the term, ESG is, or, a particulate matter, or even CO2, right? We, as people who have studied science, maybe understand that, but when we're making content, for me at least on social media, I'm like, I want to teach this to a friend of a friend who maybe doesn't know anything about these issues, and making sure that I'm keeping it personal. So that's why I like to feature people in my stories, because I think people contain nuance, right. And people have their own lens and take of how they translate or talk about that information. So I like to, some of my best pieces of content have actually not even been me talking. Right. It's been me featuring someone that I think frames the issue in a really interesting way. And I think that content performs even better because I'm just creating the infrastructure for that to shed light. And so I think if you're someone who maybe struggles to tell the story yourself, I think creating that framing to support someone else's story to have shed light on can be really supportive, as well as talking about these things in more accessible terms.
Fantastic.
Well, I don't know, is there anything that actually still works today, right? And I know that, the overall intention of this conversation is perhaps to highlight some of the things that might, make for a successful story. Mm-hmm. But the question here is, I think, that also means that it allows me to start thinking in a linear fashion, meaning that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, you get a story that is going to stick.
Right.
But that's not true. And I absolutely want to challenge that notion in this conversation. I know this is School of Media, and I guess it's journalism students sitting in here. And I wanted to take this from a very ambiguous perspective, mm-hmm. meaning that there's nothing that's linear anymore today, right? If you look at the environment in which you're functioning, if you just take the United States, the politics, the mass disinformation, information glut, how do you get something that sticks? Right. It is challenging. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But what I'm also doing with that is an invitation for more creativity and more innovation. And that has to happen today if you're going to get a good story that sticks. I'll just give you a quick example. So I just came from Central African Republic. I don't know how many people in the audience would know where that is, but that's in the Congo Basin. Mm-hmm. And among all the stories that I did, I just got a call from, an email from Red Butler, who is the founder and CEO of Mongabay. And he said, do you know your story on the Mongabay worked pretty great, meaning that it's the second most read story this month in Mongabay's global stories. And I was surprised. So I did a story on Mongabay. Mongabay is actually an elephant clearing where you have the most elephant at any single moment in a year. And he told me he had the most views. That's a surprise to me because, again, the kinds of stories I thought would make, maybe get traction out of the lot that I came out from in Central Africa wasn't that one. And what was it all about? It's just about the Mongabay. It's basically an elephant clearing. And I talked to the people, talked to trackers, talked to some of the people in the local community, talked to the scientists, and then, many people viewed it and liked it. I'm not 100% sure, and I asked him, what do you think? Why do you think that story worked? Anyway, I think the bigger point I wanted to make here is that, yes, of course, I understand we all have to be authentic. I believe in authenticity. I like to be who I am. I don't want to be anything else other than me, right? And we want to use that in crafting stories. But at the end of the day, when I just look at the overall, the environment in which we're doing stories and in the multiple geographies in which we are and all the complex things that have to happen for you to achieve success, I don't think in less than 17 minutes we can talk a little about what is required for you to get a successful story. But this is an invitation for a lot of thinking, for a lot of creativity, for a lot of innovation. And when we sit in the newsroom, of course, Mongabay has a track history of doing robust, long-form, 5,000, 3,000 word stories. Some of them have worked great. Many people have picked it up and made policy with it. I know even the US government, Treasury used one of our stories on Chinese boats in the ocean to make policy. That I know, of course. So that's great. But the bottom line here is that we are eternally searching for the right, angles, for the right people to talk to, for the right framing, trying to unlearn, trying to listen more, just spend time listening more, right? And again, this is just me now. Again, when I started journalism, I would quickly just think of something and go ahead and do it. But when you talk to people, when you talk to communities, in our case, mostly frontline communities, that's where we report from, you understand that you don't even know anything and that your framing could be very biased because you are going into this thinking you know anything. And so that has informed how I run the newsroom. I run Mongabay Africa. So a lot of the conversation with the editors and the staff writers is just take time to listen more, then that gives you a better story. It gives you a different perspective, it gives you a different angle.
Right, so what you're talking about is, we study a lot of theory here, right? We teach our students some very specific practices, right, and approaches, but really what we need to have is to understand the audiences, right? So let's talk about, because you said how to be creative like a couple of times, but let's talk about that. Give us an example of what it looks like to be creative in terms of crafting stories that stick. Like, what's an approach, a creative approach that you would offer students?
Well, that's great. And again, I know it's easier to say than do because I face this every single on a day-to-day basis. But creativity would basically mean that you have to try first to challenge your own assumptions and your own thinking. What that simply means here is that even for me, born and bred in Africa, the assumption is that I know everything about Africa. That's wrong. That's totally wrong. And that is the beginning of understanding how to tell a good story, in my view. And what that also means here is that in a day and age where facts are questioned, science is questioned, you've got to ask yourself, do I just rely on facts as a way of telling a story? Because I know many of us would think if you just tell the facts, then you've made a point. That's not enough today, right? It means you have to do something else that you need to do. Is it how you pick up those facts and tell that story? Is it the messenger around that story? Who are the people you're talking to? Are you finding the right number of people to speak to in a way that makes it authentic and people to buy into that story? What is the environment in which you're functioning, right? If it's in the United States, I'm not going to, probably you guys know this better than I in terms of how polarized the environment is and how do you ensure that you're getting the Joe Rogan on the right and maybe, I don't know, wherever is that very, big talking head on the left who would be able to buy into your story. Can you achieve that anyway? That is where I'm talking about creativity. And to me, it's just asking more and more questions and knowing that you've not you just keep asking as many questions as you can for you to come to that story. And in the process of telling that story and how you disseminate it, also be mindful of all of those different things.
Fantastic.
I love that.
Kristy?
I would say experiment with lots of different formats. I think you all have seen so many different students who had different formats, from like short form video to podcast to written form. Like, people think, written form is outdated, but we're seeing Substack writers and people, getting even more views than people on TikTok right now. So like, written form is not dead. It's actually thriving right now. People want more analog and longer form content. So I would say, like, don't shy away from those things. That we are caught in an attention economy. So like, you have to find the balance between like not just being on one platform. And I think being comfortable with that, like, I don't think that that's something to deter you or overwhelm you. I think you should like lean into that, like experimentation. I've experimented with lots of different things and have been really unconventional. Like, I've done everything from, explainer videos and podcasts where I interview experts to having a climate dating show. Like, I have a show where I put people on a first date to talk about climate change. And I just wanted to see what would happen because I love reality TV. And people love the content, and that was really experimental. I've also done women on the street videos where like I'm in New York City and like asking people like random questions. And I've kind of experimented with like every format you can imagine, and I honestly just see what performs and what flops and kind of just like reiterate on that through each process. And you'll figure out like what your audience is responding to. I think it's important to like ask your audience. So like, if you're like, I don't have an audience, ask the people you trust the most, either in your research department or your friends or people you trust to watch your content, and be like, hey, is this good or not? Like, what is your feedback? And don't take it personally. It's a part of your creative process, and be like, actually, is this something you'd actually watch all the way through? Did you actually tell them this is actually what I wanted you to learn by the end of my episode or my video? Did you gain that insight? And it's a little bit different than abstract art or interpretive art in that way, where it's like, when it comes to content and putting those stories out there, you kind of have to be a bit more data driven and a little bit more responsive to what people are actually responding to. And I think you'll learn more about yourself along the way by doing that and being consistent.
Now, you brought up data, which is important. You talked about data too. Can you talk a little bit about when you are curating, crafting your stories, the extent to which you rely on data, and I don't know if it's versus, but in collaboration with, kind of like character-driven narratives. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I work with lots of organizations that'll provide me with like a toolkit with their information, which saves me a lot of time to do the research. And I think a lot of research institutions that can provide that to creators is super invaluable. So like, I've had organizations where they're like, yeah, just like make a video about this like very complicated policy. And I was like, I need you to give me a one-page document with like exactly the facts that are like already, you've researched, you made sure that like there's no misinformation. I can cite the sources in that, and I basically just plug that in where it feels relevant, and then we'll kind of combine that with like a character, or narrative-driven type of format. So I try to combine the two, but I myself try to rely on like those institutions I partner with to do that, and I think that's where we need to bridge the gap. There's so many incredible scientific institutions or traditional academic institutions that have the research and have the bandwidth to provide that. And then we have storytellers who can basically take that, interpret it, and turn that into whatever format they know resonates with their audience. And I think we need more of that bridging of information gaps and translation. And I've seen that be really successful because I've kind of helped organizations pilot that, where like they're like, we want to work with creators. And I'm like, well, you need to take that information and make it more digestible, because the public's not going to just look at a graph or a chart and even understand what you're saying. So why don't we break down, that visual and decide, does that visual still explain the data without having to throw a bunch of numbers at people?
So how do you determine what's trustworthy in terms of the data that you receive? How do you know that you can take it and then do something with it? Have you ever had a situation where you got misinformation If so, how did you handle that? Or do you find that most of the time the information that you're getting from the institution is accurate?
Yeah, there was a situation where I was like, these numbers are really outdated. Like, it was like about a story that I was doing in like 2024, and they were giving me like 2019, 2020 data, and I was like, I don't think this is gonna work and work out. And so I had to change the entire script, because I was like, I think we need to focus on whatever data or news articles you guys can get me like that are more present, because the later dates that you go in the past, the more people are going to be critical of you and skeptical of your resources and the sources you're citing. So it's really important to try to find the most up-to-date information that you're putting into your content, for sure.
Fantastic. Now you're talking about bridging data and emotion. You're talking about bridging relationships with communities. How do you bridge relationships with communities so that you can gain their trust in order to tell the stories that need to be told and elevated?
So we don't fly in journalists anymore, which is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of, maybe Western media covering different parts of the world. So we have our journalists in Brazil and all of Latin America, same thing in Asia, and the same thing in Africa. So we try not to fly in people, because again, you know what that means. You cannot substitute local expertise by whatever you may study from a distance. So that's point number one. We also ensure that we're in the frontline communities. And what we do is that we never leave those communities, meaning that if we found maybe a story on mining in Lualaba, maybe this is in the DRC, and we wanted to cover that story, we ensure that those who are going on, those we send to go report the stories are from the region. They understand the culture, they understand the history, they understand the politics, the economics in ways that fewer people would never know.
Right.
And they can speak in local languages, not in anything that's pretty much foreign. Of course, you're never going to have that always, but again, when we fly in somebody, of course, there are a few occasions that would happen. We ensure that the local fixers are there to be able to make sure that they're facilitating the fidel transmission of the messaging from those sources to whatever may end up being published, right? So building those community relationships require a lot of time. And that's what I think we've done great in the last, several years. And we think that's the right way in which, you tend to have the trust of the community in ways that they can tell you things, in a way that would inform the reporting and have the necessary nuance and be accurate and all of those different kinds of things. So that's what we do.
So has there ever been a situation where you feel like, where you actually alienated an audience? And if so, how did you repair it?
Well, I don't know of any specific case where we have, I can remember of one right now, maybe in the case of the work that we're doing, but that can happen, right? It can happen because, if you misrepresent whatever you may gather from the field, it's possible that people feel offended by that. And that's why we try to invest a lot in terms of ensuring that, the reporting on the ground is, the infrastructure we put in place allows for us to be able to gather things and make sure that we are represented in with all the necessary nuances, to put it that way, right? But I can't remember of a specific case whereby we had to annoy somebody and then fix that, right? I can't remember of any specific case, yeah.
Okay. So, you talked a little bit about the Real Housewives of the Serengeti, like you like to social media or whatever, and you do the dating. Can you talk a little bit, because there's a lot of negative energy around social media. I would say I'm a middle-aged woman. And so those of us who are trained journalists sometimes get caught in these, what I call old people traps, where we're just like, oh, no, you have to, you must, social media is the, bane of our existence. But can you talk a little bit about the ways in which you can actually use social media to tell the stories and to connect with communities to bridge those gaps?
Totally. That's a big basis on why I even built my platform, Brown Girl Green, was because I would go to all these climate conferences and I studied climate science, and I just didn't feel like I could get my foot into the room, and I felt like I couldn't really get access to understanding the resources and the opportunities for me as a young person to grow and to lead in this industry. And social media changed my entire life. It opened up so many doors for me to meet incredible people Social media led me to becoming a reporter at the White House. It led me to becoming one of 16 members of the US EPA's National Environmental Youth Advisory Council, where I was actually advising the US government on environmental policy.
Give her a hand.
And that was because people were seeing that I was actually, building community online and offline. And now through my company, Green Jobs Board, which also started as a post on social media, we are reaching 200,000 people online who want to learn about green careers, and we're actually getting them placed in green careers. So people are getting jobs through social media. So when I hear people say social media is this useless thing, or it's just vapid, or vanity metrics, I'm like, no, I've actually seen it change people's lives. Because communities and people that otherwise wouldn't receive this information are getting pathways to people and resources and information faster than ever before. And I think being in an age of information, we can either use it as something that overwhelms us and disempowers us, or we tap into it as a source of power where we can actually connect and build community faster than we've ever been able to before. And so for me, I use social media as a vehicle for what I call digital organizing and cultural organizing, where I view it as this incredible palette and open space for people to come from all different walks of life and disciplines to be like, hey, actually, I am going to talk to that scientist or that historian or that person making dance videos on TikTok, and we're all going to come together and actually talk about a cause that means a lot to us, and we're going to actually see that translate into real change on the ground.
Fantastic. So when you talk about storytelling on social media, I think people, you mentioned Substack, right? And,
yeah.
And people are very curious about, will print continue to thrive in that space? When's it going to go away? The video, and they keep adding the other tools, right?
Yeah.
The audiovisual tools. So can you talk a little bit about the demystification of storytelling in the social media space?
Demystification,
i.e. in terms of people really believing that really good storytelling is not possible in the storytelling space,
yeah.
and that there aren't real approaches to deep and meaningful and thoughtful and intentional and informative and fact-based storytelling in those spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like to say it's a both and, because I think there is that, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, there's a lot of that. There's so much censorship and misinformation, more than we've ever seen, and I think that's why it's even more important that we have storytellers like the folks in this audience here today who are writing, who are publishing, who are putting out content, because we are up against a battle of an algorithm that is feeding the general public so much misinformation right now. And so we need environmental storytellers more than we ever have before. And not just environmental storytellers, we need coalitions. Yeah. We need people who are kind of working together to collaborate. We need institutional resources from philanthropy, from universities who are supporting those storytellers that are doing this work. Seeing so many of these incredible students on stage, I kept asking people do you want to distribute this even further? Because this piece is amazing. Where do you want this to go? Right. And some of them were like, oh, I didn't even think I could reach more people. And I was like, no, that is exactly what we need. We need folks like them who are getting that support from storytellers like us and other institutions to really amplify their work. And I think with that being said, I just want to say that I've used social media as a starting point for people. Like I said, I've used it as scaffolding. So it's okay, watch this video, then sign this petition, learn more about this organization. Or hey, watch my 1-minute video, come to an event that's 6 hours long where we're actually getting you trained and mobilized to learn how to lobby, right. Your politicians. And so I view it as a gateway and not the end all be all for mobilizing people. And that's why I always tell people these videos are confined to not have as much nuance, and that's the downside of it, right? But that's where I think a Substack, a long form content, a podcaster can come in and complement, those digital and, IRL or in real life spaces as well.
Fantastic. David, what are your thoughts on social media and storytelling? How do you use social media for storytelling with your organization?
Well, I think it does have huge potential, and actually it's making a difference in significant ways. The world is 8 billion people. As part of my work also, I work for something known as, I sit in the steering committee of the Global Common Alliance. And one of the things we've been reflecting a lot in the last couple of years is how do you build a broad coalition to be able to buy into climate information and biodiversity or whatever, pollution, land degradation, and whatever, sustainability overall. in part because I think there's a whole thinking that, you know, we've not made significant progress in terms of public buy-in into what we into climate communication.
Right.
There is some truth to that, right? And the question here has often been, how else can you do this? And social media obviously is one of those paths that you can use. It's a pathway, definitely. Obviously, it has some multiple challenges. She's spoken at length about, you know, what are some of those challenges, right? But in our case, of course, we use social media in very significant ways. We've had a significant pivot to social media with the whole social media infrastructure in different bureaus, in the global team, in our different bureaus. And we think, obviously, it's making a difference in the sense that if you look at just all the studies that have been done, not only in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, you would realize that many people consume news through their telephones, right? So mobile is reality. You can't take that away. And so you've got to meet people where they actually consume information, right? So whether you're using that for crowdsourcing in terms of getting sources, or whether you're using that to be able to send out what you produce, it's obviously, you know, a tool.
Right.
And we've got to think through in very significant ways how you use the tool, right? But again, the point here, I think, is social media, it's pretty great in terms of reaching certain audiences, particularly the young people across the world. And you've got to find a way to use that. Now, of course, again, creativity is very important in terms of success. I don't know how many people read the long forms that we do. I know there are people who like it, who love it. Every time they talk about the work that we do, they would say, we love your deep dives. But they're 3,000 words long. I don't know how many people would read that. And so you have to bit-size that into something that can make sense to another kind of audience, right?
Yes.
And that's a very significant part of success moving forward. You've got to understand your audience. Audiences are not monolithic, even in this room, right? I don't think everybody, we may share a lot in common, but I do know how much we're very different. And what that means is you've constantly got to be thinking about, you know, what tools do you use to reach out to audiences in the most effective ways?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So when we think about audiences, and I'm coming to you, Chris, too. When we think about audiences, how do you determine which audiences to target, you know, depending on what platform to use? Like, how do you all make that determination? Because you cover so many different areas.
No, you're right. So, well, in the case of my work, and in Mongabay to be more precise, so we do have, it's digital, right? So it's a website, but we also have microsites. So there's Indonesia, India, Latin America, Africa, subsites, right?
Right.
But besides that, we've also understood that you've got to find a way in which you can reach out to multiple audiences. And in this case, we know our audience. We know our niche audience for the most part. They're scientists or researchers, they're government workers, particularly in the sustainability side, with the climate, biodiversity ministries and that kind of thing, development workers and that kind of, we know them broadly, right? And we know that this is how they've engaged with us, whether it's a website or whether it's the social media and those other platforms that we use. So it's a deliberate thing. You've got to have a strategy, of course, again, but keep in mind, I'm probably, maybe this happens after you've done 25 years of this, you realize that, there isn't a linear way in which you can achieve success. No, you can write whatever strategy, it just doesn't guarantee success. There's just a lot more to that has to be done for you to achieve success. So to your point, yes, the audience is critical, but I think where we are right now, it's no longer whether we have the right audience. I think the bigger question for us right now is that how do you broaden that audience into people who do not buy into the overall messaging of whether climate, biodiversity, or anything of that sort. And I think that's where success or failure lies moving forward, not only in journalism, but I think overall as a broader humanity trying to get a better planet moving forward.
All right, well, I just got the nod that we are over time, and I did not know because I was talking to you all for another hour. Okay, so last question. This is our wrap-up question. Sorry, no key takeaways today. Hopefully you've been paying attention and taking notes, and you're going to watch this again. What is one storytelling habit everyone should start doing tomorrow?
I would say just post it. Just be consistent, and don't be worried about failure or rejection or how many views you get. I think it's not about virality, it's about building a legacy. View your work as a portfolio for the long term, not the short term consumption. And think about, how you're building that legacy for other people to follow your example.
Well, just keep doing it. Yes, of course, it's challenging. There are moments where we question whether this is working or not. But again, just keep doing it, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.